There is a piece of clay in the British Museum about the size of a phone. It is nearly 4,000 years old. Both sides are covered in small wedge-shaped marks pressed into the surface while it was still soft. It is not a poem. It is not a law. It is not a prayer to anybody. It is a man complaining about a delivery of bad copper. It is one of the oldest complaints anybody has ever found written down. Not the oldest writing. We'll come back to what the oldest writing actually is, because that turns out to matter. But as a letter from one annoyed person to another, this is about as far back as it goes. His name was Nani, and he lived in Ur, in what is now southern Iraq. He had paid in advance for copper ingots, and he had sent his own servant across town to collect them. What the servant was shown was not what had been agreed. The metal was poor, and when he objected, he was told more or less that he could take it or leave it. And then you can feel exactly what happens inside Nani, because it is the same thing that would happen inside you. It stops being about copper. He writes to ask what kind of person treats somebody like him this way. He points out that the money was paid up front. He points out that it happened in front of his own servant, which is very clearly the part that stings the most. He announces that in future, he will be counting the ingots himself, personally, one at a time in his own courtyard. And then he says he is not going to be accepting bad copper anymore. 4,000 years ago. And it is worth knowing why ea-nasir could afford to talk to a paying customer like that. Copper did not come from anywhere near Ur. It arrived by sea from across the Gulf in shipments that turned up when they turned up. If you wanted metal, you dealt with whoever happened to have metal, which means ea-nasir had something considerably more valuable than good service. He had stock. And a man holding the only stock in town can be as unpleasant as he likes. The other thing that gets me about this letter is its shape, because you already know it. He states what was agreed. He states what actually turned up. He states how he was spoken to. And he closes by announcing what he will be doing differently from now on. That is the structure of every complaint you have ever written. It is the one-star review. It is the email that opens with, "I have been a customer for 11 years." Nobody had to invent that sequence. The oldest surviving example of the form already has all 4 moves in the right order. So yes, the easy thing to say is that people never change. And it is true, but that is where most people stop. And the better question is why this is the letter that survived. Because we do not have most of what those people said. We have a sliver. And it is a very strange sliver. Writing did not begin as literature. The oldest tablets anybody has ever dug up are not stories or poems. They're counts. Sacks of grain, jars of beer, numbers of sheep, and the names of the men held responsible for them. Writing was invented to keep track of stuff. Everything else it does, it learned later. And accounting is what lasts because of what it was written on. Ordinary sun-dried clay crumbles away, but clay that ends up in a fire, a house burning down, a city being sacked, gets baked hard, and then it is very nearly permanent. So the disasters of the Bronze Age preserved its paperwork. Meanwhile, everything those people actually cared about, the songs, the jokes, the arguments shouted in the street, whatever you say to your own children at night, every bit of that was spoken out loud, and it is gone. Completely. Without a trace. Which means the Bronze Age we can read is not the Bronze Age they lived in. It is disproportionately made of receipts, deliveries, debts, and rows about deliveries. We know ea-nasir, that was the copper dealer's name, because his business went badly. And there is one more thing about him, which is my favorite part of this whole story. When archaeologists excavated the house that appears to have been his, Nani's letter was not the only complaint in it. There were others. Different customers, same man, same problem. He kept them. Nobody knows why, and you can pick your own explanation, because none of them make him look good. Perhaps they were business records, perhaps he was disputing them. Perhaps he was simply the sort of man who keeps things. But the result is this. One of the best documented private individuals of the entire Bronze Age is a mid-level copper merchant. And he is documented almost entirely by people who were furious with him. And that is the part worth carrying out of here, because it applies to everything anybody tells you about the past. The people in that world who tried hardest to be remembered were the kings. They carved their names into buildings and statues and foundation stones and had lists made of everything they had conquered. That writing was commissioned and paid for and specifically designed to last forever. And we read nearly all of it as propaganda. We do not believe a word of it. Nani was not trying to be remembered by anyone. He was trying to get his money back. He is the one we believe.